Hey, it's me. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are, or night, depending upon what part of the world you're in. So I wanted to share some thoughts about the product journey, building product, etc. I've had a lot of different kinds of experiences getting product feedback. It's really been all over the map, but the one consistent thing, the one consistent experience I've had around product feedback is that it is almost always the case that when there is a true market need, that when the market is hungry for something, that the feedback you get is kind of hard to read. I remember back in the day, I was considering making a product, and I sent out a survey asking people for what their needs were, what their hopes and fears were with regards to a specific market, and got back hundreds of responses to a survey where I was soliciting feedback, hoping we could build something that would get product market fit. And I really had to kind of get a beer and just kind of sit back on an easy chair and process everything that came in, because it was overwhelming. There was so much need in this market that a lot of the asks included stories that were kind of sad, or they were from people that were just feeling completely overwhelmed. The responses were from people that just expressed so much need, and in a lot of cases were asking for things to be built that were just impossible to be built. And it was a lot to process. And I think in general, as product creators, we often think we want this feedback from the market, and then we get it. And it's kind of hard to deal with. The truth is that most people don't know what they want to see built, right? They only know their problems, and they know what other people have built. So often the feedback you get when you're asking for such feedback is, people asking for something to be built that is just like, hey, can you build this thing that someone else has built or something like this, but better? Or they'll just speak to some outcome they're looking for, like they want to make more money, or they want six-pack abs, or, kind of the product, the consumer product categories tend to be, I put them into three buckets: getting paid, getting laid, and not dying, right? So getting paid, that's around finance, personal finance, savings, career progression. The getting laid category, I say that facetiously, but that's personal relationships, sex, love, fulfillment, things like that. And then not dying. Again, this is all mostly a joke, but these categories are jokes, but that's around health, fitness, longevity, things like that. And people just, they just know the outcomes that they want. They will hardly ever speak to specific features. They will hardly ever just give you something on a silver platter that you can just take in and then, directly turn into features. That's pretty rare. And then in more enterprise or B2B niches, I think in order to get the kind of feedback you really need, you kind of, in my experience at least, you have to build something for the market to respond to, right? So I think about these three phases of growth, and they are, when it comes to the product, and it is build, iterate, and scale. And the build phase it's a really exciting one, I think, for a lot of people who love product and creating product. It's about limitless potential and everything you can do. It's during the build phase, at least before you've released something, that the sky is the limit, and people often underestimate how long it's going to take, or what it's going to take in terms of resources to build something. it's this place of pure potential. And it's absolutely exhilarating. I love that phase. And if you take a long time to release your product, like a lot of people do, you can kind of stay in this place of you can stay in this fantasy land, right? Where people can ask you how your product is going or how your startup is doing, and you can say, oh, it's so cool, we're building this and this and this. It's not out yet, but it's really going to be fantastic. And you don't have to risk the possibility that you put your thing out into the world and then there's crickets chirping, right? But if you're doing product correctly, I think you're releasing often. There's I forgot who said this, but if you're doing product correctly, you should be embarrassed by the first version of your product, because it allows you to put something into the world that people can respond to. And I think the challenge around being in the build phase versus the iterate phase or the scale phase, and the iterate phase, that second phase, is really after you found product market fit, and then it's about calibrating and really tightening up what you do. But the challenge in the build phase is to simultaneously capture that feeling of pure potential and, that the tabula rasa, right? The blank slate and everything that can be, and retain that while you're putting something out into the world that is inevitably going to receive a lot of negative responses because it's early and it's not well developed. There might be bugs. There might be issues with the product. There might be huge gaps between what you've put out and what your competitors have, or what is needed to just have a functioning product that you can charge for. And that can be kind of depressing, right? How do you get constant feedback that what you're doing isn't enough while retaining the innocence and joy of building something from scratch? Often people do their best thinking when they're not receiving any feedback at all, because what they're doing is completely uncluttered by other people's opinions, and they aren't like responding to the constraints of what they've already created. It's just about, unlimited potential. And in that phase, you can come up with a lot of really, really creative solutions. So I think my message today, if you are a creator, or if you're someone who's putting product out into the world, whether it's, anything from a newsletter to a podcast to software to a physical product, is please, please, please release things early. Make sure you don't overpromise or overcharge for them. Be very mindful of what that product is when it's being released, but also do your best to not confuse the build phase with the iterate phase, right? Make sure that you're releasing your thing out into the world, you're getting feedback, but you're not confusing which phase of the business you're in, right? If you're in the build phase, you're in the build phase, and that's absolutely where you are, and you shouldn't be listening to people's feedback from the point of view of someone who's in the iteration phase, because that's gonna get you really, really depressed on the whole. Anyway, I try and keep these categories in mind, myself as we're building things out. And I don't know, building product is a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy it. And anyway, that's my thought for today. I hope you've enjoyed this journal entry. If there's any topics you'd like to talk about, hit me up in our forums or on Twitter or wherever. All right. Hope you're having a good day. Take care. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked this content, please help me out by leaving a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It provides me with encouragement and it helps other people find the program. Also, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast, go to asknomics.com, leave me a question, and I'll do my best to answer it in the next few days. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.